No Paige? No problem. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, again, just want to be very grateful and thankful for all of you and how this podcast has grown since last March. And we're not just talking hyperbole. We're the number one college basketball show on the Locked On Podcast Network. And it's because of fans like you who value great UConn content. We're proud to say we're the only daily podcast covering both the UConn men's and women's basketball, the hoops capital of the world. And we're thrilled to bring you the coverage you deserve. So we're showing some gratitude. We're donating 10% of our revenue to Husky Ticket Project, helping send kids from underserved communities to UConn games. They probably were having some people at the XL Center last night. And I'm sure there'll be some more during the season. So today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Win or lose, visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, let's dive into what looked like a lot of fun. UConn's 81-27 win over Xavier. Now, let's keep it into some perspective, right? This wasn't a game, as we talked about with our new co-host, Bella T, yesterday, that was going to move the needle. Xavier's was a 5-9 team. They weren't ranked. They're not even a top team in the Big East. But it also was like, what you would I would consider it a get right game, right? Because you lose Paige for about 3 games, a week and a half, whatever it will be. And she was there. She was dribbling. She looked good. I just don't think it's that big of a deal, but they are being cautious, which is great. Not a team that UConn really should kind of, what's the word? Measure their game and the amount of points they scored in this game, or how they did it. But you still have to win the games. You still have to go out there and play. You can't just kind of, this isn't Major League Baseball where you can just hold 4 fingers up and intentionally walk somebody. You actually had to throw those pitches back in the day. So you still have to actually win these games. So, these are moments that are worth kind of breaking down from that perspective. But it was really less about the result and more about what we saw from some specific players. And we're going to get into that right now. I think you could definitely tell that Azzi Fudd was star of the night, may be strong, but I think because she scored the most points and she was efficient, 9 of 14 from the floor, 3 of 5 from 3, didn't miss a free throw, had 3 steals. I would, her all around game, I think, is what made her the star of the game, right? She looked confident, aggressive. And what stood out is how much she attacked the basket. This wasn't just a game where she sat back and relied on how good of a 3-point shooter she was. Azzi, took it to the hoop. She took some contact. She made some plays happen in a way that we really haven't seen consistently from her this season, obviously, but from her really in a while because of the way she's had injuries. And also, I think probably it's there's got to be a part of her that doesn't feel comfortable playing as aggressively anymore just because of the fear of being hurt. So it was good to see her play freer. And she mentioned that herself. She said after the game that she felt freer on the court, and we could definitely all see it. She's, trusting her knee again. And what that trust could potentially translate to is her playing with that fluidity and confidence that really is a staple of who she is as a player, of who they brought in to pair with Paige Bueckers. And so without Paige, she's still actually, I looked at this because, again, I've been watching these tape delay, like early this morning, watched everything, watched this whole game. And so she had, only played 20 minutes, but really didn't need her to. And it was great because we're going to break down the team's, stats here in a second. But if you just from a minutes perspective, everybody played like at least 18 minutes, except for Cadence played 9. But KK Arnold had 21 points, 21 minutes off the bench. Allie Ziebell, we're going to talk about her in the second segment. 18 minutes. Morgan Shelley, 22 minutes. Ice Brady gave you 22 minutes tonight. Azzi, the least amount with Jen Elfie, both had 20 minutes. I think that's probably by design, both of them coming off serious injuries. Caitlin Chen, surprisingly poor game for Caitlin Chen, but not everyone can give you 20. But she 26 minutes, and Sarah 20 minutes. So yeah, it was just an interesting game because it was so dominant. I think they caused 32 turnovers. So it's really hard to 32 turnovers and converted that into 42 points. I mean, hard to lose games like that. Sarah was her usual self. 15.7 rebounds, 5 steals. She disrupts so much of what an offense does. She also, really kind of contributes to how things space on the floor. I knew that Paige being out, in particular in this stretch, was probably going to be a net positive for UConn as long as it wasn't a long stretch. So, and let's not forget freshman Allie Ziebell, who we'll talk about more in the next segment. She came off the bench and hit 5 3-pointers, finished with 17 points, and it's something that I called for in yesterday's show. The biggest person I want to see take advantage of this opportunity of having more minutes potentially is Allie Ziebell. She came into this program as the sniper, as the absolute lights out 3-point shooter, and I'm not denigrating her ability at all, but she just hasn't been able to be consistent, and that's part because she hasn't gotten a ton of minutes. But the other part is when she has had opportunities, she's been okay, right? She's made 1 of 3 or 1 of 4 in a game. She really hasn't had that signature game where like look at Ashlyn Shade's game against Iowa State, where she was like 7 of 7 in the first quarter and had 20 points. Yeah. Like we haven't seen, and I'm not saying she's going to get that type of run, but if she gets like 15 minutes in a game and she's able to give you like 3 or 4 threes on like 4 or 5 shooting, I think that's what they're looking for. So I think that's what they were looking for. And we're going to talk about Allie Ziebell and her game last night coming up after the break. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even goals you want to hit this summer or this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future, things like vacations, things like that. No more stressing about the budget every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, back on Locked On UConn. Talking about UConn's 81-27 win over Xavier and who played well, right? Allie Ziebell. don't often toot my own horn, but I got that one right because she had to have one of these games sooner or later, right? It felt like it was a nice breakout moment for her. She came off the bench, played a season high 18 minutes, 17 points in 18 minutes. Remember how I said they were looking for like 4 or 5 from 3? How about 5 of 9? 5 3-pointers on 9 attempts. It's why she was brought in here. There's nothing wrong with being a shooter. There's nothing wrong with having a skill set that you are specifically brought into a school or a place to do. And that's what Allie Ziebell was brought in here to do. I don't think that Allie has looked comfortable playing, but she wasn't forcing shots in the past. She was just, whenever she was open, she shot, and that's her MO, and that's honestly what Gino wants her to do. So, but she looked really comfortable in last night's game. She wasn't forcing anything. She wasn't trying to do too much. She let the game come to her, finding spots that she's hot with, and she really made the most of that opportunity, because I do think that this is an absolute confidence boost, and hopefully it'll continue, where she puts a couple of these games together, and you start to kind of expect it, right? When she gets in the game, they have to account for her, and that could lead to down the road, when you're playing a tougher opponent, throwing her in there in a high pressure situation, and knowing that you're going to get that type of production. She doesn't have to score 17 points every game. I'm talking like 10 points off the bench. A 10-point score off the bench is so phenomenal for a coach that knows that, especially when it's someone like this who can shoot the lights out from three. 10 is really like 12, because you can give me 2 to 4 3-pointers a game. Whew, we're cooking, right? And so what's really encouraging is how Allie stepped up at a time, when they need it, right? Because even though they didn't need it per se for the score, it's the psychology of Paige being out, and them tinkering with the lineup, and kind of figuring out who should play and who should get minutes, and kind of building out this backlog of bench players that eventually will be larger contributors. And so that's my take on Allie, is that she kind of pushed herself into the forefront. Like, if you look at the stats from last night's game, let me scroll up on my little sheet here. Yeah, like, Sarah's always going to get her minutes. She had 15 and 7, 5 steals, crazy. Only 3 turnovers. Probably like to take those down a little bit, but she had a lot of usage. Morgan Shelley played 22 minutes, played some tough defense. Had 4 rebounds and 3 assists. I know she's playing more of a forward role right now while Aubrey Griffin is out, but she didn't do herself any favors last night in terms of like the pecking order. I know Gino trusts her, but she had a big kind of a goose egg. She didn't score any points, 0 of 5 from the field. Then same with Caitlin Chen. I was shocked that Caitlin Chen didn't really do much. Like, if you don't score, that's fine. Like, it's not about the points, but 2 steals, 3 assists, only 1 rebound. That doesn't feel good to me. But part of that is because of the opponent. This team only scored 27 points. I think it was like 10 points at halftime. It's just, it's not a fair assessment, is what I'm saying. So I'm like backtracking on my own opinion, but you would like to see a little more from Caitlin, who you brought in to be a steady leader. And I thought this would be an opportunity for her to kind of step up. But the fact that it's Allie is great, because, she could be a unlocker for this team, because the whole point of having 3-point shooters around a woman like Paige, around a woman like Sarah and Azzi, is when you're focused on that 3, that triumvirate, when everything is all set, and you have Allie in the corner ready to lock and load, and she can knock down threes consistently. That's scary. That's scary for other teams, because if you're getting 17 points from a freshman that really hasn't been doing much for you, and then you get Paige back, and then you get Aubrey Griffin back, now we might be talking about a whole other scenario where the Final Four is, I hate to say a lock, but a lock. And the national championship is starting to look a little more realistic. I know we haven't beaten anybody yet this year, but that's life. You just don't get as many chances as you used to with UConn's schedule. So when we return, it's a segment that we're going to start doing, whether I'm alone or if I ever have a co-host. And most of the time on Fridays, we'll be having T Baker on from her Hoop Stats and I think he does some other things as well, but and we'll get his full bio. But really enjoy his perspective on the UConn women and the college basketball world as a whole. So yeah, next segment around the world of women's college basketball coming up after this. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn with your host here, Mark Zanetto. All right, so that game last night, two biggest points were Azzi looked free. Minutes were great for almost everybody. Love that they kept Azzi with 20 minutes and Jana with 20 minutes to kind of lighten the load there. Absolutely thrilled for Allie that she had a big game off the bench that I said I think this coaching staff was looking for, and they got that. So that was a nice thing for them to see. But let's take a look ahead, not necessarily in who they're playing down when Paige is gone or in the Big East, but just around women's college basketball as a whole. Had some indigestion there. Had some really interesting developments in the college basketball world over the last week or so, and so we're going to start it with right now. If you were to go on the ESPNW.com and look at the bracketology, UConn is projected as a number 2 seed as of right now, and in the same bracket as Notre Dame. That's feels pretty fair and appropriate, given the season has gone so far. They really haven't beaten anybody of I wouldn't say of substance. I think North Carolina's a good team. Iowa State's a good team. But I'm talking, who I'm talking about. I'm talking they didn't beat Notre Dame. They didn't beat USC. They'll have 2 more high-profile opportunities in Tennessee and South Carolina that I've talked about ad nauseum. But until then, they're just going to kind of stay on that 2 seed line. If they beat South Carolina, then we can start talking about a 1 seed. If they beat Tennessee, they'll probably more stay as a 2, because I think that's where Tennessee is going to be seated, 2 or 3. Yeah, right now I think if UConn wins out and then they either go 1-1 against South Carolina or Tennessee, or if they win against South Carolina, then I think there's an opportunity for them to get a 1 seed. But we'll see. I think the other 1 seeds right now are South Carolina, UCLA, USC, and I don't think anyone would argue that UConn should be seeded 1 over any of those teams. And so, there's a lot of games to be played. There could be a battle of attrition because, injuries happen as we're seeing. Azzi missed some time, Paige missed some time. Thankfully, it's not a long-term thing. Notre Dame is a team that's been consistently solid all season, and I think they deserve the 1 seed right now. For UConn, the prospect of going through Notre Dame to make a Final Four would be an interesting and exciting game. I think a lot of fans would revel in that. But it also could be a tough game because, when you think about the game we played in South Bend, in that Notre Dame team and how they're constructed, it'll be different. It'll just be absolutely a different team, especially if Aubrey's back, if Azzi's back full strength like she is now, and then Paige is playing. And then as we talked about, if you have someone like Allie in there who can knock down threes, if you think about that game, Ashlyn Shade gave you nothing in that game, and it was still close. And then they kind of went up 10 late. But, yeah, I'll take our chances against Notre Dame again with a healthy Azzi, Paige, Allie, Morgan, Sarah, less foul trouble, all that. But while UConn's path may look promising if they do play Notre Dame, you kind of have to wonder if South Carolina is going to hold on to that 1 seed, because they took a major hit this week, or I think it was this week or early last week, where they lost Ashton Watkins. Watkins is out for the rest of the season with a torn ACL. Huge blow for the Gamecocks, including their national championship hopes. Watkins was a key player for South Carolina, particularly on the defensive end, and really just kind of that gives them that grit, that the nastiness, the swagger that South Carolina always plays with. And I say that lovingly because I love the way South Carolina plays. People may get up in arms about how aggressive they are, but I could give a rip, man. That is a well-coached, fantastic team that Dawn Staley has, but she's going to need to make some significant adjustments there. But they have plenty of talent. That's the thing. Their margin for error just got a little smaller. That's really kind of what it comes down to. When you lose a big piece of what you do as a coach, then you start to scramble and say, like, did I prepare this team well enough to kind of have the next man up mentality? So for that team, they had a legitimate championship aspiration. This injury is a tough setback. So it made things a little easier when you play South Carolina, but I wouldn't go so far as to say they're not title contenders anymore, because they definitely are. And on the flip side, USC is trending like this, upwards. If you're just listening, I'm putting my finger up. JuJu Watkins and the Trojans handed the number 8 Maryland Terrapins their first loss of the season. I believe it was yesterday, in what was arguably the biggest win of the year for them, because they beat UConn at UConn, so you could put that up there as well. But I'm talking about just like, you're a Maryland team that plays against you, that is coming in undefeated, that probably is feeling themselves, and then you handle your business. Is a nice. I hate when people say statement wins, but sometimes a statement win is exactly what it is, right? And I think it's a statement win for this reason only, is because JuJu Watkins is not Paige Bueckers. And I don't mean that in a bad way. She is such a dynamic athlete and scorer that even if she's not essentially trying to get her other teammates involved, and this is gonna sound like a backhanded compliment, but it's not. She elevates everyone's play around her, and even if, let's be honest, because of the tension she garners, that even if she wasn't trying to create opportunities for her teammates, just based on her being on the floor in a threat, people pay attention, and then that opens things up for her teammates. So that's what makes them so tough. And I'm not gonna compare her to some of the greats to do it, but when you have a great player and everything is centered around them, and also they seem to get their points regardless of anything. When things start to break down, she's not an unselfish player. I just want to say that. Like, JuJu is not unselfish. So she will definitely defer, but she's the alpha. She is 100% who they go to. And the rest of the team is solid, and they can shoot it. And they got and Kiki Arifin is fantastic down low. So they are 100% a legitimate title contender. And with Watkins at the center of it all, if they keep this up, they're going to be a dangerous team come March. And that could be on the other side of the bracket, could be a potential Final Four matchup for UConn. And I'd love to see them again, because, again, I want a chance to play some of these big teams full strength. We haven't had a chance to do that yet. So, again, this week and this last couple of weeks has really shown how competitive and unpredictable this season can be, because in a blink, you lose someone to an ACL, or, you get the scare of a lifetime when Paige gets knocked down. The stakes are only going to get higher, and I really can't wait to see how it plays out. But until then, this has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I'm Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked on, stay connected. And remember, it's not just about getting it done. It's about doing it in a way that it can't be done any better. That's our goal every day. And just remember, go Huskies.